99% of every species that ever lived is already extinct. Something has erased almost everything that has ever existed on this planet, and somewhere out there, the same thing may be waiting for every civilization. Scientists call it the Great Filter, a barrier no civilization seems to survive. But what if humanity already crossed it and never realized it happened? The universe is old, unimaginably old, and enormous beyond comprehension. Billions of stars, billions of planets, billions of years for life to emerge. By simple math, the galaxy should be full of noise, signals, civilizations. Instead, there is only silence. Total, unbroken silence. This is the Fermi Paradox, and it has haunted scientists for decades. If the universe is this vast, where is everyone? One answer is more unsettling than the rest. Something stops them. Something that ends civilizations before they ever reach the stars. Scientists call this invisible barrier the Great Filter. And no one knows if it lies ahead of us or already behind. For decades, most assumed the filter was still ahead of humanity, that every civilization eventually destroys itself before reaching the stars. But there's another possibility, a quieter one, a stranger one. What if the filter isn't in our future at all? What if we already lived through it and simply survived? To understand this idea, we have to go back, far back, 4 billion years ago. Life on this planet barely existed at all. And multiple times since then, almost all of it was wiped away. The first true crisis came from life itself, and it nearly ended everything. Ancient microbes released a toxic gas into the air, oxygen. It poisoned nearly every living thing on the planet at the time. Scientists call it the Great Oxidation Event. It may be Earth's first mass extinction. Almost every organism alive back then died. And yet, life continued. This would not be the last time nearly everything came close to ending, because 252 million years ago, something far worse was coming. Volcanic eruptions on a scale almost impossible to imagine tore open the crust. The sky turned dark for years. The oceans turned acidic and lifeless. This event is known simply as the Great Dying. Around 90% of all species on Earth vanished. It remains the closest life on Earth has ever come to disappearing entirely. And yet, somehow, a fraction of life clung on and rebuilt everything. This pattern would repeat again, and again, and again. 66 million years ago, the sky itself became the threat. An asteroid the size of a mountain struck the Earth without warning. Within hours, the world changed. Within years, most of it was gone. The dinosaurs, rulers of the planet for 150 million years, disappeared. But small, unremarkable survivors endured in the shadows. One of those survivors would eventually become us. Life on Earth has faced extinction-level events at least 5 times. Each time, something catastrophic could have ended everything permanently, and each time, something survived. Barely, but it did. This is only the story of Earth's biology. The story of intelligence is different, because our own species nearly disappeared too, more than once. Around 74,000 years ago, a volcano in Indonesia changed the course of human history. The Toba supervolcano released ash that darkened skies across the entire planet. Global temperatures dropped. Food sources collapsed across continents. Some scientists believe the entire human population dropped to just a few thousand. For a moment in history, our entire species stood on the edge of extinction, and yet, that tiny surviving population is the ancestor of every human alive today. This is called a population bottleneck, and it may be more common than we think. If it happened once to humanity, it may happen to every intelligent species. A single disaster, in the right place at the right time, can nearly erase everything. So if biology has survived filters like this before, could civilization survive its own? Because nature isn't the only thing capable of ending a species. In the 20th century, humanity built its own potential filter and nearly used it for decades. Two rival superpowers built enough weapons to end civilization many times over. This period became known as the Cold War, and it came closer to catastrophe than most people realize. On more than one occasion, false alarms nearly triggered global nuclear war. Entire arsenals were placed on alert because of a flock of birds, a training tape, or a broken satellite. In at least one documented case, a single officer's judgment prevented a launch. History nearly turned on a single decision, made in the dark, under enormous pressure. If that decision had gone differently, this video might never have been made. This is exactly the kind of moment the Great Filter Theory describes. Not an alien invasion, not a cosmic disaster, a choice almost made by our own hands. If nuclear war nearly ended us once, it could end any civilization, anywhere. But nuclear weapons may only be one version of this danger. Any sufficiently advanced civilization eventually gains the power to destroy itself. The question is never whether the power exists. It's whether wisdom keeps pace with it. Some researchers believe climate instability could be another version of the same filter, not a single sudden event, but a slow erosion of the conditions life depends on. Others point to artificial intelligence as a filter civilizations may not see coming, a tool built to solve problems that quietly grows beyond its creator's control. These are only theories. No one knows which filter, if any, applies to us, but every one of them shares the same grim pattern: power outpacing wisdom. If this is the filter ahead of us, then the story isn't finished yet. But there's a reason to believe humanity has already faced filters like this. And one. Every generation before us faced a moment that could have ended everything. Volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, near total population collapse, nuclear brinkmanship. Every single time, something survived. Every single time, the story continued. This doesn't prove the Great Filter is behind us, but it offers something rare, a reason for hope, because survival on this scale has never been guaranteed. And yet, here we are. If the past is any guide, extinction has never been inevitable, only close. But hope isn't the same as certainty, and the next filter may not resemble the last one. So the real question isn't whether we survived filters before, it's whether we'll recognize the next one in time. To answer that, we have to look more closely at what almost stopped us before. Genetic evidence backs up the story of humanity's near collapse. Modern humans carry remarkably little genetic diversity for a species our size. That's the genetic signature of a species that once nearly vanished. Every human alive today descends from a population that may have numbered only in the thousands. From that fragile beginning, 8 billion people now exist. This is the strongest evidence we have that a filter can be survived, not just avoided. But biology surviving is different from civilization surviving. The stakes have changed. A population bottleneck only matters if enough people survive to rebuild what was lost. A modern collapse might not leave survivors with the knowledge to rebuild at all. This is why some scientists believe civilizational filters are far more dangerous than biological ones. A species can recover from famine. It's less clear a civilization can recover from itself. This raises a strange question scientists call the observer selection effect. We can only ask this question because we survived long enough to ask it. Any species that didn't survive its filter would never be around to notice the pattern. This means our own survival could be misleading us into false confidence. We are the lit candle. But we don't know how many others simply went out. This is the heart of the Great Filter debate. We are the only data point we have, and a single data point can't tell us whether we are the exception or the rule. Still, some patterns in our own history offer a cautious kind of reassurance. Every documented near-extinction humanity faced happened before we had the tools to prevent it. Today, for the first time, We can see many of these threats coming. We track asteroids, we monitor volcanic activity. We model climate decades in advance. For the first time in Earth's history, a species can see its own filters coming. That alone may be the most important difference between us and every filter before. But foresight only matters if it leads to action. History shows plenty of warnings that were seen and ignored anyway. So seeing a filter coming is not the same as surviving it. This is where the Great Filter theory becomes less about aliens and more about us. Every theory about alien silence is ultimately a mirror held up to our own choices. So let's return to the beginning and ask the question differently this time. Not, why is the universe silent? But, what did it take for us to still be speaking? Every civilization that ever existed had to survive its own planet first. Its volcanoes, its asteroids, its ice ages, its own biology turning against it. Then, if intelligence emerges, it must survive itself. Its weapons, its politics, its inventions built faster than its wisdom could keep up. That is two filters, not one. And Earth's history suggests we've survived the first many times. The second filter, the one we build ourselves, remains unproven, untested at civilizational scale. We do not know yet whether we will pass it. We only know we haven't failed it completely, yet. This is why some scientists reject the idea that the Great Filter is purely behind us. They argue biological survival and technological survival are two entirely different tests. Others argue the opposite, that survival is survival, no matter what nearly ends it. If they're right, every filter humanity has faced counts as real evidence, and the evidence, so far, leans quietly in our favor. But leaning in our favor is not the same as certainty, and certainty may never come. This uncertainty is not a flaw in the theory. It is the entire point of it. The Great Filter was never meant to give comfort. It was meant to ask a harder question. Are we the exception that beat the odds, or simply early in a story that hasn't ended? No theory can answer that question for us. Only time can. But there is something we can control, even without knowing the answer. Whether the next filter comes from the sky, the ground, or our own decisions, we can prepare. Every past filter humanity faced was survived without warning, without foresight, without choice. The next one, if it comes, may be the first filter we see before it arrives. That single difference may be the most important advantage any civilization has ever had. Foresight without wisdom failed civilizations before. Perhaps ours will be the first to combine both. This is not a promise. It is only a possibility. But possibilities are what survival is built from. So we return, one final time, to the silence of the universe. It may not be a graveyard of failed civilizations, waiting silently in the dark. It may simply be early, a universe still waiting for its survivors to grow loud enough to be heard. We may not be the exception to a rule we don't understand. We may simply be early to a story still being written. And if that's true, then the silence out there isn't an ending. It might just be a beginning we haven't reached yet. But hope built on speculation alone is fragile. So let's look at more recent evidence. In 1918, a virus swept across the entire planet within months. It killed more people than the First World War that had just ended. And yet, within a generation, the world had recovered, rebuilt, and multiplied. A century later, another pandemic tested the modern, connected world in an entirely new way. This time, the world had tools the past never had. Rapid science, global cooperation, shared information. It was not a perfect response, but it was faster and more coordinated than anything in human history. This is another quiet data point. Our ability to respond to threats is improving over time, but new threats are also emerging faster than ever before. Biodiversity loss is accelerating at a pace many scientists compare to a mass extinction event. Unlike the 5 extinctions before it, This one would not be caused by nature. It would be the first extinction event caused by a single species, acting largely without intention. This is not a distant hypothetical filter. It is already underway. And unlike an asteroid or a supervolcano, this filter can still be slowed by choice. This may be the clearest test humanity has faced. Not survival by chance, but survival by decision. Every filter before this one was something that happened to us. This filter, if it is one, is something we are actively shaping, right now, in real time. That is a strange kind of power and a strange kind of responsibility. No comet warned Earth about the Great Dying. No falling star warned the dinosaurs. We are the first species on this planet able to see its own filter coming and choose differently. This single fact may matter more than any theory about filters ahead or behind us, because awareness changes the equation entirely. A civilization that sees its own extinction risks approaching is no longer purely at the mercy of chance. It becomes, for the first time, a participant in its own survival. This does not guarantee survival. Nothing does. But it changes what survival depends on. It no longer depends only on luck. It depends in part on choice. And choice is something no supervolcano, no asteroid, no ancient plague ever had to reckon with. This is the quiet argument for hope buried inside the great filter theory. Not that we are certain to survive, but that survival, for the first time, is partly in our hands. Which brings us back to the silence of the universe and what it might really mean. Maybe the silence isn't proof that civilizations always fail. Maybe it's proof that surviving takes far longer and far more effort than we assumed. Every filter humanity has faced took something from us. But none of them took everything. The Great Oxidation nearly ended life. Life adapted. The Great Dying nearly ended complexity itself. Complexity returned, stronger and stranger than before. The asteroid nearly ended dominance by size and strength. Intelligence rose in its place. Toba nearly ended our species entirely. A handful of survivors rebuilt all of humanity. And the Cold War nearly ended civilization by our own hand. It did not. 5 filters. 5 near endings. 5 continuations. This is not proof that we will survive whatever comes next. But it is proof that surviving the impossible is something this planet's story does, again and again. Perhaps that is the real answer to the silence of the universe. Not that no one else made it, but that making it has always been slow, fragile, and quiet, loud enough to build cities. Not yet loud enough to be heard across the stars. That may simply be a matter of time, not proof of failure. Every civilization that ever crosses the great filter has to begin exactly where we are now, uncertain, vulnerable, armed with just enough knowledge to be dangerous to itself, and just enough wisdom, so far, to still be here. This balance between danger and wisdom is the real story hiding inside the great filter theory. Not aliens, not invasions, not distant monsters hiding among the stars, just us, learning, slowly, whether we can outgrow our own mistakes faster than we repeat them. So when you look up at a silent night sky, remember what that silence might really mean. Not a graveyard of the failed, perhaps, instead, a long, unfinished story of the surviving. Humanity has already stood at the edge of extinction more times than most people realize. Volcanoes, asteroids, ice ages, plagues. Our own weapons nearly turned against ourselves. Every single time, something continued, something adapted, something survived. This does not answer why the universe is silent. No one can answer that yet, but it offers something else. A reminder that survival has never been guaranteed. And yet, here we are, still asking questions, still searching the sky, still here. And that quiet fact, more than any theory, might be the most remarkable thing about us. So let's ask the question one more time, but differently than before. Not, Are we alone because everyone else failed? But are we alone because surviving takes far more than anyone assumed? If that's true, then every year humanity continues is not ordinary, it's extraordinary. Every sunrise is one more day added to a streak longer than most species ever achieve. Every generation that grows up without a filter ending everything is quietly making history. Not because it's guaranteed, but because it never has been, and we're still here anyway. This is not a call to be careless. If anything, it's the opposite. Every filter humanity survived, it survived without knowing survival was even possible. We have something they never had, the knowledge that surviving is possible, and the responsibility that comes with it. That responsibility does not belong to scientists alone or to governments alone. It belongs, quietly, to every person alive during this narrow, fragile window of time. This is not a burden meant to frighten, it's simply the truth of where we stand, between a past full of filters we survived and a future full of filters we haven't met yet. No one before us has stood exactly here, aware, capable, and still deciding what comes next. The universe may still be silent when we look outward, but we are not silent to ourselves. We speak to each other. We warn each other. We build, argue, fail, and try again. This, quietly, is what surviving a filter actually looks like from the inside. Not a single dramatic victory, 1,000 quiet choices made without knowing the outcome. That is what every past filter looked like too, long before anyone called it a filter at all. It looked like people surviving one difficult day, without knowing there would be a tomorrow, and then another, and another, until enough tomorrows became an entire species' history. That is the real story hidden behind the Great Filter Theory. Not a warning about aliens we'll never meet. A quiet tribute to everyone who came before us and made it far enough for us to exist. Every one of them faced a filter they didn't fully understand and passed it anyway. So maybe the universe isn't silent because no one made it through. Maybe it's silent because making it through has always been this quiet, this slow, and this human. We may never know for certain if we've already survived the Great Filter, but we know this. Every day we continue. We add one more quiet piece of evidence that survival is possible, and that, quietly, might be the most hopeful thing the universe has ever shown us.